Good morning, evening, afternoon, everyone. I am Dorm. This is Dorm Streams, and welcome back to the Games of the Decade list. We have 2 videos left. We're in the top 20 of this list, and without further ado, let's get right into it. Number 20, Grand Theft Auto 5. If you don't know what GTA 5 is, well, odds are you're probably not watching this video. GTA 5 was, at the time it was sold, the biggest game on the planet. I know some other games like Fortnite and things that have been free to play have eclipsed it, but as far as AAA games to sell bonkers numbers, GTA 5 is still right at the top of those sales charts. And for good reason. GTA 5 is one of the most satisfying, fun, ridiculous open world games I've ever played. And I'm just talking about the single player. The multiplayer in GTA 5 is next level, so much so that YouTube companies and Twitch streamers are still pumping out daily, weekly content in GTA 5. This game came out 7 years ago, and that just speaks to the staying power of the multiplayer. So I put GTA 5 at this point on my list mostly for the single player. I think the single player of GTA 5 is somehow now underrated, because when everybody thinks of GTA, I think most people go to multiplayer. I'm sure some people, even their brain might go to like roleplay, GTA roleplay, which is a huge thing now and has been for a while, but has really like blossomed, I would say, in the last year and a half, 2 years. GTA 5 single player is what brought me to the game. I grew up playing GTA San Andreas, probably far too young. I played GTA Vice City, probably far too young. 4, I probably played at a more appropriate age. I'd say I got that game when I was like 15, 16. And 5, I was 18 years old when it first launched on PS3 and Xbox 360. It would relaunch again on the next-gen consoles later the next year, so 2014, and then again on PC. So that kind of helped the game keep a little bit longer shelf life. It kind of went from console to PC in a yearly way. But the single player of this game is phenomenal. If you like open world games, if you like sort of heist movies, Ocean's 11, bank robbery movies like Point Break, or there are so many movies that fall within that genre. If you like that kind of movies, this game is quite obviously and kind of tells you that's the inspiration for this game, are these big heists, these big bank jobs and things, elaborate schemes with a lot of action. Those are kind of the centerpieces of the single player. And you play as 3 protagonists, Trevor, Michael, and Franklin, all of which who are very well fleshed out characters. I like how different they are. Michael is sort of your classic, used to be a mobster kind of guy. Trevor is your guy that was friends with Michael, doing bank jobs with Michael all back in the day, but now he's gone a little bit crazy and he's kind of kooky. And then Franklin is the new recruit who has a different perspective on things, and together they kind of form this nice cast along with other people, Michael's family members, Franklin's friends, Trevor's love interests. But there is a larger cast here, but really the game centers around these 3 people, and the fact that you can play as each of the 3 people, a lot of people at the time, myself included, were afraid that was going to get very gimmicky. Instead, it does this really cool thing like a heist movie of giving you perspectives of each character as things are happening. So instead of saying like, oh, we're going to go into the bank and then you're going to fly the copter and then this person's going to be manning the boat, you play all of that. And it feels natural because throughout the rest of the game, you play as these other characters. And it just creates a really fun world. GTA is known for being kind of silly and maybe a little crude, but at the end of the day, there is some cool satire going on in GTA. There always has been. It's not, the story is interesting and it's enough to keep you wanting to go, but I think really, like an action movie, it's there to just move the plot along, and the real meat of the game comes in the stunts and the big set pieces and all of these different moments. And the single player alone is enough to put it on this list. Like I said, the multiplayer, had a ton of fun with it in a few different, it seems like GTA seems like one of those games that everybody kind of collectively comes back to in small groups. I've come back to the game a couple of times and enjoyed it so much every time. It's just one of those games that you get the itch for. I know I've mentioned that a bunch of times in this list, but it is. It's just about as well made as GTA 5 was ever going to be. I know that I say something is about as good as something was ever going to be a lot in this list, but it's true. And for a game that had a lot of high expectations, Rockstar continues to deliver on their expectations that they set, and they deserve to be applauded for it. This game is fantastic. Number 19, Transistor. Don't know if we could have made a harder transition from types of games. So we go from a AAA, as big a budget game you're going to get, as big a title as you're going to get, as big a studio as you're going to get, to Transistor, a game by Supergiant, an indie dev that I adore. A few of their other games, Pyre and Bastion, have been on this list already. Transistor is the highest of those games because there's the one that connected most with me, and I think the one that is just the best game. So Transistor sees Red, who is a singer who has lost her voice. The story kind of tells how that happens. I'm not going to spoil, obviously, but someone she's close to has been imbued into a sword. His spirit and his voice has been put into a sword. And so together, Red and the sword are sort of exploring this kind of post-apocalyptic, more like in an Orwellian sense, more like a dystopia than it is necessarily like an apocalypse thing, but this sort of kind of barren technological land trying to take down these robots and defeat these robot enemies that are all sort of named after software. There are a lot of technological enemies around to kill. The interesting thing in this game, not only is the story, I think the story is fantastic. I'm trying to very carefully tiptoe around it because I don't want to reveal things that should be revealed through a playthrough. At the same time, I absolutely just adore the way this game unfolds, the way this game presents itself to you. So the gameplay is similar to something like chess in a way. So it's top down again, which I know may turn some people off, but trust me, it would turn me off too. But I adore this game. I put it at 19. I put it ahead of GTA 5, one of the most consistent, great games of the last decade, because it's that special to me. But the gameplay is similar to chess, where you see all of your opponents and what they're about to do, and you can you stop time each round and you plan out your attack, and then it happens. Now, granted, you don't have to stop time. You can just kind of play moment to moment if you want, but there are some scenarios that I promise you will need your stopping time. And that's sort of the genius of this game. It becomes part strategy, part action game where you literally start learning yourself and learning the way you like to play and learning the way the enemies like to play and planning for each of those things. In chess, one of the biggest things is planning 2-3 moves ahead and planning what your opponent will do. It's very similar to this, where you're planning, okay, I know I can do this now, but if I get over to this spot and they all miss, then I can get back around behind them and flank or do whatever. Another hallmark of Supergiant games are back in this, which is the fact that you can kind of combine weapons. So in Bastion, something I talked about was how you could kind of find what you like, mix and match to your heart's content. That is back in this game, and I think even more masterable. I think there are definite playstyles, and you look at speedruns or you look at strategy guides for some of the harder arenas, and everybody has a different build, and they all seem equally valid. This game is somehow very balanced in all of its potential brokenness. Like, you could think, oh, we're going to combine these two or three things, and they're great, but there's like 15 different combinations that are equally as great. It's fantastic, and you really kind of find your feel for the game, what you like, what you want to go with. Another great thing about Supergiant games is the art style. The art style is beautiful. I think this is the prettiest Supergiant game. Having not played Hades yet, this game is painterly just like all the other ones, but I think this game does the best job of translating that painterly aesthetic to its actual gameplay. So Supergiant, in every game that I've played of theirs, they always kind of have dialogue pop up with these beautiful portraits that are obviously illustrated, and then, you go back into the gameplay that's top down. And sometimes they've gotten progressively better, in my opinion, at doing that, but I think Transistor does it even better than Pyre that would follow it. I think it just nails that sort of aesthetic. The color scheme is beautiful. You're red, and most of this world is blue and black and steel and cold, and you're this effervescent red character, and your sword is even this bright neon green, and it's just, everything stands out so well in that game, what needs to stand out, and the UI looks beautiful. And I would be remiss if I did not talk about this game's soundtrack. It is one of my top 5 I want the soundtrack on vinyl from a video game soundtracks. It is just an incredible collection of music. I'm not saying as a video game collection, I'm saying just as a soundtrack. As someone who has recently gotten very into like movie scores and soundtracks along with just video game soundtracks, it is just so well done. The soundtrack manages to feel all very similar, which is something that is a feat anyway. Like anytime you can hear a song and think that sounds like that game without a melody specifically echoing at that, they've done a good job. Transistor does a great job at that. There are these sort of echoey, refrainy strings and sort of minimal technology sounds, and then the humming that comes from Red. Because you've lost your voice, you can still hum, and there are just these little haunting humming noises that go on in Transistor. I can hear the theme of Transistor right now as I'm talking about it. And I think the music plays not only a big part in just your enjoyment of the game, but also in the actual story of the game and the reasons in the motivations behind your character. And the fact that the music folds so much into the game and is so good it's almost like a video game musical in a weird way, but not in like a 50s Singing in the Rain kind of musical, but more everything just kind of melds together in a beautiful way that is absolutely breathtaking. Transistor goes on sale a lot. I love it, and I think it's absolutely worth the $15 or however many dollars it's on sale for right now. Go buy it. Go support Supergiant. They make great stuff, and to me, this is their magnum opus. Number 18, Uncharted 4. We have finally hit the first Naughty Dog game, and guess what? It's not the last. I will say, though, in making this list, I believe Uncharted 4 was the game that I most really need a replay of to really accurately put in the list. I'm going mostly off of first impressions. Uncharted 4 came out recently enough that I feel comfortable in my opinion of it, but not recently enough that I can say definitively this is where it ranks for me, like some of the stuff in the top 10. So it's kind of that weird middle ground for me right now. I think this is where it goes. I could see if I did a revision of this list 2 years later after replaying it, I could see it moving up quite a few spots. I could also see it falling a few spots. I don't really know exactly how to properly quantify this game without replaying it. It's not something I've gotten a chance to do yet, but when I wrote this list, this is exactly where it fell, and I think this is an accurate spot for it. Again, not saying that this is the most definitive list in the world. I've said that many times, but when ranking things, this is where Uncharted 4 fell. And there are a lot of things to love about Uncharted 4. Part of the reasons that I put it here as the first Uncharted game on the list, spoiler alert, there are more Uncharted games on the list, is there are some things in this game that I think are the best executed of any Uncharted game. I think the gameplay is the best that they've ever done as far as like the moment-to-moment climbing stuff, shooting stuff. I think they finally really nailed it in this game, and that's something that's been a criticism of the Uncharted games. If you don't love the story, if you don't love the characters, people really love harping on the combat, and that's fair. To me, it's never been a detractor, but I understand that. I think this one does it better than all the other ones do. I think also graphically, this is still, when I think of like the prettiest games I've ever played, it's up there. And the fact that this game is, 4 years old now? And I think if I were to go back and play it on the PS4 Pro on a 4K TV, I think that would be confirmed, is a testament to the graphical fidelity of this game. There are some things that I won't get into too much that don't quite sit as well with me as a fan of the series and as someone who had played through 1, 2, and 3 in the lead up for 4. That was when I finally got into the series and finally said, all right, I'm playing all 3 of them. There's an additional character that if you've played the game, you know exactly who I'm talking about, that feels, while I love the actor who portrayed him, and while I think he is a fun character in the game as a standalone, feels oddly too important for this game to have never been addressed in the games previous. It's almost, and a lot of movies suffer this too, where, you know, it's the 4th movie in the series. Oh, we're going to bring back this person's long lost ex-lover, and now they're super important. Weird that they've never got mentioned in the last 3 movies. Something similar. It's not an ex-lover, but it's someone related to one of our main characters, and that connection took a while for me. Not saying it's bad, not saying I hated it, but that connection took a little bit for me to finally connect with. By the end, I was totally happy with the way that character's story resolved, but it did take a little bit for me to kind of get the ball rolling. That being said, there are a few scenes in Uncharted 4 that I think may be some of the best performed, directed, and written scenes in all of gaming. There's one scene in particular in a hotel that is still burned into my brain. Now, that is to say, a lot of people's love of Uncharted is the fact that they feel like a movie. I'm going to applaud this game for not only the movie-like parts, the scenes particularly, but just the overall story and the setting. I love this sort of idea of finding these hidden pirate stories. Specifically, there's a location about halfway through the game where you find this tale of all these pirates who met up together and sort of had dinner together. And that specific setting, I think, is absolutely gorgeous. Of course, people celebrate Uncharted for, word of the episode, I guess, the set pieces. And this one delivers on those too. The clock tower specifically is one that I always think of when I think of Uncharted set pieces. That's in 4. As well as, and I don't think this may not get enough love, but just sort of the open field that you drive up through, and it's quite a big mission where you're kind of going through picking apart all these people in that big field. I think that is kind of an underrated one. I remember thinking that was so fun and so different for the series, where you're finally driving, but it's not like in a chase sequence, and you can kind of explore and shoot as much as you want. Again, I'm to the point now, 4 years removed from it, and I played it initially at launch, that I'm a little hazy on some of the details. The way the game begins, I think, is wonderful. All of the callbacks to the series, I think, are super well done. This game is phenomenal, and I'm not trying to diss it. I'm trying to sort of front load why I think some of the other games in the series are a little bit ahead of it. That being said, this is about as fitting an ending as I think you could write. Specifically, the actual ending of this game and the sort of the way that the story all wraps up, I think, is beautiful. I think it's super well done. I know some people were disappointed by it. I don't know why, because I think if you thought about it, we kind of could have expected something like that coming in. Again, not going to spoil. But just the way the game references its entire lineage and sort of the lineage of Naughty Dog, it's a very cathartic playthrough. It feels like you're reliving old friendships almost. Like when you meet up with a friend that you haven't seen for a while and you start telling old stories, the game does a really good job of building that feeling into itself. And I think that's super commendable for a series that so many people, myself included, absolutely adore. Number 17, Papers, Please. Bonus points if you hear the Papers, Please theme in your head. Bum, 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 bum. Anyway, Papers, Please is yet another game by Lucas Pope. I keep having these indie devs who pop up multiple times on these lists. Papers, Please was the first game that I ever played by Lucas Pope, who made Return of the Obra Dinn on the last episode. And it is one of those indie games that really, I think, made me take indie games seriously and made me appreciate indie games and be such a huge fan of indie games. It is about someone who works in a place called Arstatska, which is sort of this pseudo-Soviet Union region in what I assume would be around Russia area. You play as someone who works at the border crossing agency. So people come into you, they show you their passport. You either say they can go through or you make them stay and they can't go through. At its core, it just seems like a normal puzzle game. Oh, you know, I have these 3 or 4 rules that all good passports go by. If it's a bad passport, you kick them out. There's more to it than that, and I think that's the brilliance of this game. Yes, there is a fun puzzle mechanic in that. It's almost like I Spy, where it's like, okay, I have to check all these lists. Oh, your date was wrong, or oh, your date's impossible, or wait, you don't have green eyes, or whatever. You know, there are different, or things like that. And there are things you have to scan through each day that get progressively and progressively harder, and you have more and more things to scan through. The beauty of this game is in 2 other mechanics alongside this really fun puzzle mechanic. One, every character talks to you. Well, almost every character talks. Every character has the option to talk to you. So some characters will tell you a sob story. Some characters will be rude to you, but maybe they have everything that meets up to snuff, but do you let them through? Some characters will try to bribe you. Some characters will do several different things through that dialogue that makes it more of a human interest thing. The other thing is at the end of each day, you receive money. And with that money, you have to decide how you spend it. Now, granted, a lot of games have money systems, but in this one, it's sort of depicting day-to-day life of a normal worker in this era where you can either pay for heat or for your kids' food or give money to your parents, or it's very serious things like that. And so you're incentivized to make more money, and to make more money, you have to process people faster and process people correctly. But do you take a bribe and actually make more money from that one person getting it wrong and getting a strike from your company? Or do you let them go, keep the perfect record, and try to keep going? There are a lot of different motivations going on and a lot of different endings in this game, depending on how your game ends. And it's just beautifully done. Some of the stories are super heart-wrenching. You know, there's one particular story that I'm going to spoil here. Apologies in advance if I spoil. If you need to skip ahead for like 3 minutes, I totally understand. There's a story early on of a woman and a man who are going through the border, and the woman's like, oh, my boyfriend's right behind me. I can't wait. We're going to have a beautiful world, a beautiful life together. She's fine. You let her through. And then the boyfriend comes up and presents his passport, and there's something wrong with it. Now, do you let him through and take the doc to your pay and your family and your overall well-being, but let them be happy together? Or Do you dock him and suddenly split this couple looking for the next part of their life, the next chapter of their life in this new area? There are things like that. That's sort of a minor one, so I don't mind spoiling it. There are things like that throughout the game that you have to make decisions, and you will never feel good about it, by the way. This game is not a feel-good game. You're not going to come out of this game being hunky-dory, but you are going to come out of this game, in my opinion, feeling for your fellow human in a way that you may not playing something like GTA 5. It's a very humanized story and a very grounded story in the guise of this really fun and I Spy-y puzzle game, and that's all I want from a game like this. Number 16, BioShock Infinite. BioShock as a series is one of the most well-loved series in all of video games. It's sort of divisive whether people really like Infinite or they don't. I remember it being more divisive at the time it came out, which was when I originally played it. Having not played any other BioShocks, I owned BioShock 1 and 2 on Steam, but as I've mentioned many times in other things, it would always crash. For some reason, the PC port that I had just didn't work on newer PCs, and I never had the chance to play it. So my first BioShock was BioShock Infinite. Now, granted, that may skew me more positively, but I think as time has been removed from it, I think people generally are more positive on BioShock Infinite than when it came out. I remember some people were not happy with it. I, having my first time with BioShock in a story like this, in a world like this, think this game is incredible. It is one of the best, most interesting stories in fiction, movies, video games, books, whatever, that I've ever experienced. There's never been anything quite like BioShock Infinite for me as a story. Now, granted, I was young when I played it. I would have been 17, 18 when it came out. And for me, it was the first game that I ever really played with this many twists and turns and its own, absolutely own universe that it lived in. And so it's a very formative game for me. I understand that I may like it more than some people, and that's totally okay. But I just think this game is super valuable as a story. I also really enjoy the gameplay. People are not super high on the gameplay. I'm not trying to celebrate this game from a point of its detractors, but I think the gameplay is really fun for a shooter that it combines some really cool spells and things like that. The carbine from this game is one of my favorite guns I've ever played with in a game, and I don't hear people say that a lot about any gun from this game, but I just really love that gun a lot. I think the enemies are varied enough, but I think the thing you're here for in BioShock Infinite is the story, is the setting. The setting of Columbia, this sort of city in the clouds, is already cool enough. Like, you've sold me this, it's a city in the clouds in the 1800s that is like seceding from America for reasons, and they're going up in the sky. I'm already sold. This is everything I want. It's 1800s fiction, which y'all know I love 1800s stuff. Devil in the White City is often what I cite as my favorite nonfiction book of all time, maybe my favorite book of all time. That and The Road by Cormac McCarthy are the two that I always think of. It's got weird political stuff going on. It's got weird American history stuff going on. It's sort of masturbatory of American history, really interesting way. It's an alternative history thing, but it's not just, oh, what if the Nazis won World War II, which is one that people do a lot. This is more, no, what if someone was just radically in love with the Patriots and left because they love the Patriots so much? It's absolutely phenomenal. I love, and again, I don't think these are spoilers because they're literally indicative within the first 15 minutes of the game. As soon as you arrive, there are statues of Ben Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, and George Washington, I believe, but built like Greek gods who are all offering you their hand. It's just the most unique world. I would love another BioShock. I know that there are rumors abounding that another BioShock is being made. I gave a rave review on BioShock 2 when I first reviewed it in this list at 62, but BioShock overall as a series, BioShock 1 I think is one of the greatest games I've ever made. It holds up so well. I played it for the first time on the remastered collection. I still loved it, but I think BioShock Infinite is right there with it. I think this game is absolutely awesome. I don't want to spoil much. The setting and the world and the story and the characters, I still love the characters in this game. Specifically, there are these two characters called the Lutece twins. I won't spoil them, but I think they are one of the most fascinating set of characters I've ever seen. I think about them way too much for a game I played like 7 years ago. I love the Lutece twins. I think they're phenomenal. And there are just a lot of really cool quirks to that world that kind of feel like unraveling their own little presence. And it's just something that's really fun to think about. And I think that deserves to be celebrated. Number 15, Batman Arkham City. Easy and simple. The best superhero game ever made. I loved PS4 Spider-Man, but I think Batman Arkham City sets the bar for all superhero games to come from here on out. I think it is the best of the Arkham games, a series that I love. I think it is the best adaptation of a non-video game IP and franchise into video game form. I think Arkham City is as good as you're ever going to get with a Batman game. It is that good. When I initially wrote my notes for this part of the video, I wrote like, you know what a video game's like. And then I realized, oh wait, no, Rocksteady made us realize what a Batman video game is like. The reason we all have this preconceived notion of what Batman video games should be is because Rocksteady made it that way. Batman games are part combat, part detective work, part story, part roaming around an open world city, and that is all done to perfection in Arkham City. The combat is incredible, masterable in a way that a lot of hack and slash style games aren't. There is a beautiful fluidity yet rhythmicality to this combat. Once you sort of get the feel for how many punches a combo takes and how many punches it takes to take each enemy type out, and how to know when to go to the next person and how you flick your stick toward the next person and all of this stuff, once you get a feel for that combat, you feel unbeatable like a superhero would. But you also have the really fun detective stealth side of it, where you're trying to decide where this story is going. You're trying to decide who's behind it or what's happening or what happened to the Joker here. What's the Joker doing there? What's going on? How's Harley Quinn involved? How are these other players involved? The story in itself is fun, but there are also these great stealth sections that I used to hate stealth sections in games. And one of the reasons I don't is because of Arkham City and the way that they sort of feel learnable. Again, I love things that feel masterable, things that feel like once you learn them enough, you can be good at them, as opposed to these random encounters of stealth in some games. And I think Arkham City is really good at that. I also think Arkham City does a wonderful job of giving something that most games don't have the advantage of doing, but I think they do a wonderful job of giving you payoff for characters that you would want to see. Characters like Riddler and Harley Quinn and Joker and Bane and all of these lovely Batman characters. I don't want to say any more because I might spoil some side moments, but they do a really good job of servicing the average Batman fan with like, okay, you know who the Joker is. You might know who Mr. Freeze is. You might know some of these. You might know who the Riddler is. And then they also do a really good job of servicing the hardcore. Freaking Calendar Man is in this game. Freaking the Mad Hatter is in this game. Like, there are really fun references to both sides of the Batman universe. And Arkham City does a wonderful job of striking that balance between a story that is Rocksteady's own, a story that feels appropriately Batman and appropriately video game, but also paying the right amount of homage to all of the wonderful Batman IP and really leveraging the best part of Batman, in my opinion, as someone who's a huge fan of Batman, which is the incredible rogues gallery Batman has. All of the villains, big and small, and they put a lot of them in this game. And I just think this game is executed to perfection. It is, when I think I want to play a Batman game, it is the game I go back to. Not Night, which is newer and prettier. Not Asylum, which I think is also fantastic, but not quite as good as City. City just kind of takes everything it learned from Asylum and gets even better. All the gadgets are really fun. Like, this game is one of those that you just want to replay every few years, and it's not, none of it feels like a chore. It all feels super fun to go back and replay, and I'm super grateful that this game exists as a huge Batman fan. Number 14, Guacamelee. Go figure, the huge wrestling fan likes a wrestling game. But Guacamelee is not your typical wrestling game. It is a Metroidvania skinned as a wrestling game, and that's not even really doing it a service. It is a Metroidvania about a luchador named Juan, who is fighting to get his soul back. I know this sounds weird, but he's getting his soul back by bridging the living and dead worlds in this sort of Dia de los Muertos style. Beautiful, what seems to look like traditional Mexican art is all through this thing. The color palette is incredible. It's the best looking Metroidvania I've ever played. I love Hollow Knight to death. I love some other Metroidvanias I played to death, but I think stylistically, in my opinion, in what I like in style, the bright colors, the big bold shapes, the sort of El Greco-y proportions of some of these characters, all of that comes together in just what I think fits so well within itself. Like, every element of this game fits so well with every other element. The music's wonderful. It's definitely mariachi inspired, and it's got some beautiful trumpets, and the way they flip the music when you're in the undead world versus the living world is fantastic. And just the idea of being able to not only do a Metroidvania that is really fun, Drinkbox does a really good job of making this game fun. The combat feels wonderful. That's where sort of the wrestling influence comes in. There are body slams and suplexes and punches and kicks and all this kind of fun stuff. But the way they interweave not only all of that, that would be enough for a fun Metroidvania, but the fact that you can flip the world, and like other games that have kind of done two sides of the same coin, like Link to the Past did with its sort of light and dark world, like other games have done with sort of a living and dead world, or however you want to refer to it, this game does that really well, where the platforming challenges will be different sometimes because you can switch at a point in the game. You switch between the living and dead world with the press of a button. Then all of these puzzles start happening where, okay, I can see that's in the dead world, but to get to that platform, I have to go through here, here, and here, and those are all living platforms. So I have to go living, 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 and then switch, go to dead, then switch, go to living, and it's all of this wonderful platformy goodness. And they build that into the combat too. So sometimes some of the enemies are only in the living world. Some of the enemies are only in the dead world, and you kind of have to balance before you clear the room. I just think this is the game that made me like Metroidvanias. And I think when it comes down to it, that's why I love it. This was probably the first real Metroidvania I ever played and fell in love with anyway. I know Metroid came before it. I know Castlevania came before it. I know those games are great. But for me, as someone who grew up playing sports games and then later like Call of Duty and AAA games, this was probably my real first, let's 100% this game. Let's get the platinum. Let's play it on Vita, which is where I played it. Let's do this entire Metroidvania. And for that, I think it's one of the best for me. I understand if it's not on everybody's list this high or not on everybody's list at all, but I love it. It's the game that made me like Metroidvanias, a genre now that I love and pursue willingly. And that's all because of Guacamelee. Number 13, Hotline Miami. Another indie game from around the same time. Hotline Miami was sort of the belle of the ball, I feel like, with games coverage for a while. Like, I feel like people who knew games and people who liked games would not stop talking about Hotline Miami. And I'm sure that's the reason I bought it. This was, again, kind of coincides with my burgeoning reading of games media, places like IGN and Kotaku and places like that. And this sort of intertwines with that era for me where everyone I was listening to on Podcast Beyond and whatever were talking about how great this Hotline Miami game was. I didn't know what Hotline Miami was, but I knew I could buy it on PS3 and I knew I could buy it on PC. So I waited for a sale and I bought it, and it turned out to be one of my favorite games of all time. Hotline Miami is a strange concept. It is an arcade looking, it's sort of old school 16-bit top down shooter where you go through each room and you have to kill everybody in the room before you can advance. So if you kill two people and get shot once, it's one shot, one kill for everything, including yourself. You have to restart the room. And this is the game for me that first did the die, come back, do it again. Die, come back, do it again. Die, come back, do it again. Better. Do it better. Do it better. Do it better. Finally, you did it. This is the game that created that itch for me, which is something, if you've watched my streams, I love. I'm playing through Dead Cells right now. It kind of has a similar vibe. I'm playing, in playing Celeste for trophies right now. It's a similar thing, right? You just repeat the room, you die, you repeat the room, and then finally you get through it, and you feel elated to get through it, and you're presented immediately with another puzzle. And Hotline Miami, yes, it is a shooter. It does feel at times like a puzzle game in the best way, where you are sort of creating your own solutions. It's like, okay, if I pick up the shotgun and it has so many shots, I can use it on this guy and this guy. This guy will charge me. Then I can just throw the shotgun at him. That'll knock him out. I can go over and punch him. Then I can pick up his weapon, go down the hall. If I bring these guys through the hall, if I open the door, it'll bring them to me. It's all of that. It's that sort of solving to this level because you're playing it so much is impeccable and is one of the most fun aspects of this game. I know I've talked about it several times in this video, but another great thing about Hotline Miami is the soundtrack. It was the first game that I ever really heard do the sort of synth wave kind of 80s thing that a lot of people are obsessing over now. It did it way before then, and in like a chiptune style that just is super nice to listen to. It really makes this repetitive die get better thing a lot more bearable because you're listening to this bomb-ass soundtrack in the middle of it. Overall, I think Hotline Miami is super special to me because I did everything to platinum this game, so I got all A+ ranks or S ranks, I don't remember, in every level, which took a lot of time, but a lot of specializing and really learning and going to the deep dives of the combat system, and that gave me a big appreciation for it. Not a lot of this game is random. Not a lot of it seems like luck. It is very skill-based, or at least seemingly skill-based. I mean, I'm sure I got lucky a few times, but every situation was able to combo throughout the whole thing. You can do a super combo chain if that's your thing, and you have to for those S ranks. And the feeling of getting all that right is one of the most satisfying, smooth feelings in any game. And a lot of games have tried to replicate it. I know Bloodroot's, a game I'm playing recently, has big Hotline Miami vibes. I know the Ape Out game had Hotline Miami vibes. I know Katana Zero feels like Hotline Miami. A lot of games obviously adore Hotline Miami as much as I do, and I think it really set the precedent for this style of game that I really like, much like Guacamelee just now, and I really think it deserves credit for that for me personally. Number 12, Super Mario Odyssey. Hey, a Nintendo game. So Super Mario Odyssey is phenomenal. There's no real way around it. And I say this as someone who watched the Switch event where they previewed this game and thought, wait, did Mario just become a real human, like an actual normal proportioned human for a second? Wait, did he just become a dinosaur? Wait a minute, is he a car now? What is happening? And somehow, some way, that all just works. I grew up on Super Mario 64 and Super Mario World and Super Mario Bros. 3, but I didn't have a Nintendo console for a long time. I didn't have Super Mario Sunshine. I didn't have Galaxy 2. I didn't have the Wii U standalone Mario games. I missed out on Mario from N64 basically up until Switch. And coming back to Mario was like a homecoming for me. I think this game incentivizes exploration just about as well as any game ever has. Collecting the moons is legitimately super fun in Super Mario Odyssey and just a joy to explore overall. The hat possession thing creates from some really unique puzzles and platforming challenges. And I just think if you like platformers, if you like 3D platformers, this is what you want, right? You want a big world to go explore and collect all these things in these really unique locations with fun soundtracks and fun characters and fun things to do and fun things to collect. And Mario Odyssey delivers on all those things. The colors are beautiful. It's beautifully saturated. There's some really challenging things if that's something you want. This game is going to appease just about everyone. I think a 90-year-old who knows how to play games would love it. I think a 9-year-old who knows how to play games would love it. I think a 4-year-old would love watching it. I think I, as a 22-year-old, 23-year-old when the game came out, I loved playing it. I think this game has such broad appeal. I don't really feel like I need to say much about it because we all know what Mario is, right? And this game executes on a weird premise that Mario, his hat is now a thing called Cappy and can possess other things, and somehow makes it all just work. And unquestionably, you're like, yeah, no, that makes sense. Oh, okay, great. I can become a T-Rex. That's awesome. Like, it all just works, and it's fascinating that it works to me, and it's a testament to how great Nintendo is and has always been at level design, that they can make this kooky concept work. But it almost reminds me, having just played through a little bit of Majora's Mask before having to put it down, it reminds me sort of that jump to Majora's where they were like, all right, what if you're just everything? What if you can just become everything? What would that look like? And I think this works even better than Majora's does on that concept of what if you just become everything? How would that play? What would that look like? And they execute it flawlessly. I have no qualms with Mario Odyssey. I think it's freaking phenomenal. And it almost made my top 10 of the games of the decade. I think it's weird we don't talk about this game more. I think it's damn near perfect for a Mario game. And maybe it's because I was so far removed from Mario for a long time in my life, but you know, even casually playing Mario parties and the 2D Marios at friends' houses and an occasional level of Sunshine or Galaxy or whatever, this game just feels so good to play. And it's something I still want to go back and get all the moons. And there are no trophies attached to it. And for me, that's saying something. If I want 100% a game that's not got a trophy attached to it or some other like extra UI system and achievement or anything, that means a lot. And I still do that. Every Thanksgiving and holiday, I go back to my mom's house and I play and get 10 or 12 moons in Mario Odyssey, because eventually I will get all the moons. It's just so good. It's so good. Number 11, Uncharted 3. Uncharted 3 is the last Uncharted in this list. I know some people are going to be upset that Uncharted 2 didn't make the cut, and you can make the argument that it is better than some of the games I included. I didn't want to oversaturate the list with Uncharted games. I also think 3 and 4 are my favorite Uncharted games. 2 is phenomenal. I think 3 is better in every way. I think the set pieces in 3 are better. So if we're gonna rate 1, 2, and 3 in the traditional Uncharted sense, we have the narrative, the characters, the set pieces, and I guess the gameplay. Those would be my 4 really hallmarks. And I think for me, the narrative is easily the most fun. The story of 2, I'm not a huge fan of. I think the characters are the most fun. I think the part where you get to play as a different version of Drake, I'm not going to spoil, I think that is one of the most groundbreaking. I knew about that before I even played Uncharted at all. I knew that that was like a landmark thing, and going back, I'm like, oh shit, this feels awesome. There's a lot of really incredible things that happened in 3, and I don't know why. I understand that 2 was the huge leap for the series, right? Uncharted 2 was the game that came from Uncharted 1, and everybody's like, oh my god, Uncharted can be awesome, holy crap. And I get that, but going back, looking back on it, 2 is fantastic. I'm not saying that 2 doesn't deserve to be on this list, even though for me it didn't make it. 2 didn't quite make the cut for me because I think 4 and 3, specifically 3 being here, are just a little bit ahead of it in every capacity. The cruise ship in 3 is my favorite set piece in the entire Uncharted series. I was blown away by it. When it starts turning and the water starts filling up and there's all these different things that happen, I just was blown away. I think the story is the most captivating of the Uncharted games overall. I think the characters are the most well placed. I think that like Chloe's involvement in 3 is really well done. I think that the main enemy in 3 is really cool and my favorite of the enemies, even though the final boss fight leaves some stuff to be wanted. All Uncharted final boss fights do, in my opinion. I don't know. I just think this is the best Uncharted, and I think that's why it ultimately ended up at 11 here. It is my favorite Uncharted. I understand if it's not your favorite. I think it's the best one. I think it's better than 2, and I think it's better than 4. I just think it is my favorite Uncharted. Whatever reasons you can say, I just think it is the most what I think of when I think of Uncharted is Uncharted 3. And you can't really put a price on that. You can't really put that up against other things and not have it win out. So I think Uncharted 3 is the ultimate Uncharted and is the best definition of what the series is. And that's why I ended up here. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you, of course, to the patrons over at patreon.com/stormstreams for supporting this video. Thank you, patrons. You can see their names here. I love you all. Thank you so much. If you want to be a part of that group, patreon.com/stormstreams to get your name on every video on the YouTube. A lot of fun stuff planned for the YouTube coming up. We've got one more of these Games of the Decade video that should be going up next week. After that, we've got a bunch of stuff coming up, new series, old series returning. Very, very excited. So if any of that sounds fun, or if you did like this video, like the series at all, make sure to leave the video a like and hit subscribe for more Dorm Streams content. And yeah, as always, take care of the dorm while I'm gone. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.